to Compliance Deconstructed. You are joined by Jessica Zeff. Let's try that again. Jessica Zeff, Elvan Baker, and Lorie Davis. And you know you love us. We've got a great episode for you guys today. We're talking, I say that all the time though, don't I? But it really is another great episode. We're going to talk about whistleblowing today, and we're going to have a look at Johnson & Johnson, believe it or not, in the context of whistleblowing. So with that, why don't we just dive in and get started? So for those of you who are listening, what is whistleblowing in the healthcare space? Whistleblowing is, in the simplest terms, when someone within an organization speaks up about some sort of wrongdoing, usually some sort of compliance breakdown. Let's call it fraud, for example. That's typically a lot of the cases that we see are fraud cases. When somebody speaks up and says, hey, you know what? I've tried to raise a particular issue within my organization. No one is listening. And I've got to go outside of the organization, usually with some sort of enforcement agency, and raise the concern. So with that, let's dig a bit deeper because it's actually much more complex than that. So for example, ladies, would whistleblowing, is it tattletaling? I'm interested in that. A lot of people will hear whistleblowing and they'll get very stressed about it and they'll automatically come to a negative conclusion. A lot of organizations see whistleblowing as a negative, but is it? Is it another form of tattletaling?
It's not tattletelling. It's not gossip. If you believe what you're reporting to be true and you're making a good faith report of your observations and your understanding of those observations within a bigger rules category to be out of the rules at the time you're observing. That's good faith reporting. Gossip, tattletelling is saying things that you think you know, but the intention behind it, there is no opportunity to correct it. You're just perpetuating something you observed and you just talk about it on and on.
Yeah, there's tattletaling. I've heard people say airing your dirty laundry. That's another expression. But let's be very clear. You know, whistleblowing is a big issue. It's an important issue. Normally, there's either fraud or patient safety is at risk, right? And we're not talking about your small little things. Hey, you know, they didn't follow their policy. There was a policy violation on such and such a day. No one was hurt. There weren't really any consequences. We put in a corrective action. We looked at why we didn't follow our own policy. We're talking about really big issues that can't or aren't, that are usually ignored or aren't addressed within an organization that have much broader implications for a much bigger group.
And it needs to be a little bit more systematic, right? It can be a one-off, I guess, but it needs to have some component of systemic wrongdoing with the intention of wrongdoing. Although maybe, Lorie, question, you two actually would know this better than me. Do the whistleblowers themselves have to internally report this before they report it out and about? Is there a requirement of that? Because what if they feel like, I know this is not going to go anywhere? Or can they just directly go and make a report? Or maybe they're worried about the consequences of that reporting on their job security and they just directly go to the next level.
So, Jessica, I'll let you chime in, but in my experience, it can be a combination of both. You can try to have resolved it internally, realizing it's not going to go anywhere and go external. Then there are times where the people you need to talk about are the people you would report to. So you clearly see there's no point in doing that. And so you automatically go external. So I can see it going both ways. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. They want to see that there's a pattern of documented abuse. They want to see that pattern. it can be a large, significant one-off, but to your point, many times they're looking for that recurring pattern. So I think you ask a good question, though.
I thought it was a great question. I think there are circumstances where you may not be able to raise an issue internally. Right. And it depends on the context. If obviously, and we're going to look at this in a moment, if the leadership and the C suite and the board are in on it and they're convinced and they're directing the business in a certain, well, if they're pushing the organization in a certain direction, then actually it's going to be hard to raise concerns. Or we've seen a lot of enforcement actions, a lot of whistleblowers where they've been in an organization that's very small. So the person running it and employing these individuals, they're the ones directing the misbehavior. And so the whistleblower, the purported whistleblower, can't go to the owner. The owner already knows they're doing something wrong. Right. So that's a case of having to go outside and blow the whistle. Right. But normally this is about a concern and a genuinely big concern. One really great example, and we're going to take apart whistleblowing in just a moment because there are so many aspects of this that are complicated and also misunderstood, I think. But a really great example, and if you keep up with the Department of Justice and with the OIG enforcement actions, you're going to see a lot of whistleblowing, a lot of what's called qui tam, and we'll talk about what that means. But a really great example, well, I hate to say that, I don't know how to put it. I don't know how many of our listeners have really been keeping up with Johnson and Johnson, but I read a really eye-opening book, and I don't know whether to be I am horrified, if I'm honest. It's called No More Tears: The Dark Secrets of Johnson and Johnson by Gardner Harris. Now, I'm not trying to sell the book, and I'm not trying to disparage Johnson and Johnson, but the book is an investigation of Johnson and Johnson's behavior in the last 50, 60 years. And what you see is a very trusted organization. Everybody loves Johnson and Johnson, right? We grew up with Johnson and Johnson, and we grew up with baby powder, which we're now not supposed to use. And all these kinds of medicines, they're a trusted brand name. And actually what you find out is that they shouldn't be so trusted. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Now, why do I mention that? Because a lot of the compliance issues and the wrongdoing and the patient safety issues that have come to light around Johnson and Johnson were brought to light by whistleblowers, by people who were so concerned about what they saw going on within the organization, within the business, that they blew the whistle. They went to the FDA, they went to other law enforcement agencies and said, hey, we think there's a broad problem here, right? And they help to collect evidence and build the case against Johnson and Johnson, not because they wanted to destroy Johnson and Johnson per se, but there were very real safety issues and they were consistent throughout the company. And the reason this came up and the reason this episode came up is because Lorie, Elvan, and I were talking, and we were just talking about this book, and I was saying, hey, it was a real eye opener. And I have to say, I'd heard about Johnson and Johnson and whistleblowing before, but I was really shocked when Lorie brought about a recent news article about Johnson and Johnson again being the subject of law enforcement and fraud. And again, the case brought to light because of a whistleblower. And it occurred to me that this is such a shame about Johnson and Johnson. The same old thing throughout its history. They don't necessarily appear to learn from their prior mistakes, but all of that, all of those issues were raised by different whistleblowers who were concerned enough about what they were being told to do, how they were told to missell drugs, doctors who became concerned about the use of some of the drugs, who then came to light and said, hey, wait a minute, there are some very serious and broad reaching patient safety issues because of Johnson & Johnson products, we can't get any traction within the organization. The organization has a history of overlooking patient safety and compliance requirements. So we need to go outside of the organization to raise those issues. Elvan and Lorie, did you get a chance to review that particular case? And did you have any thoughts about it?
You can go, Lorie. Like it's just
No,
like go.
I was gonna let you go. I was gonna let you go. Go ahead.
I think for me, again, just to quickly say what it is, this case, and there are many cases out there, this just happens to be one of the examples for us, is that the federal judge ordered Johnson & Johnson, which is a subsidiary of Janssen, I think that's how Janssen Pharmaceuticals, to pay almost $7 billion after a jury found the company liable in their whistleblowing case. Where did the case come from? The case truly came from two whistleblowers who were ex-sales rep in the company, blowing the whistle and saying that my company is marketing two drugs, both HIV-related drugs, but two drugs. One of them, they said, my company is marketing this specific one as lipid neutral, meaning it shouldn't be affecting your cholesterol levels, even though the FDA approved label suggested otherwise. And then the second drug, another HIV-related drug, they said that it was also marketed, i.e. promoted, as it will be affected if you use it on patients who's never received treatment. Once daily would be sufficient, even though, again, the FDA approved label recommends twice daily for patients who have received treatment. So it seems like little minutia details, but it really isn't, because that could lead to patient safety issues and regulation issues where we all know that sometimes drugs are produced to help with X diagnosis, and over the course of time we find great use on a Y diagnosis. This happens all the time. One of the hottest topics is Ozempic, where now we're finding that it's really, yes, it's a weight loss drug that was created for type 2 diabetes, but now we're finding that it's really helping women who have PCOS disorder, which is an infertility problem. So we understand that happens, but what the whistleblower said on this case is that no, it doesn't, it's not that, it's that my company is making us market these for non-approved manners and non-approved diagnosis, and they're misleading the physicians to prescribe. Then where does the fraud and abuse comes? Because then the physicians who took that marketing swallowed it up and spit out prescriptions.
A lot of financial incentives to do that, though.
There you go.
So I think the one thing I want to add on, just so folks get the order of magnitude and why that judgment was for the number that it was, they submitted almost 160,000 claims that were considered key tam or false claims. So it's not like, oh, we just submitted one or two, oops, our bad. The other thing I want to, in the interest of fairness, J&J is appealing this judgment, so I do want to make that clear. But we're talking about 160,000 claims. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of claims in my world. That's not like one day of claims. That's several months, a long, sustained duration where they were doing this. So to me, this is a big deal.
I mean, that 1.3 billion of that 1.6 is that claim. They took the claims, like you said, 160,000 ish claims. They times it by 8,000 per claim, basically judgment, and there's the number of 1.3 billion almost. So it's huge. It's really is huge.
Well, it goes, I think part of it is the history that J&J has of falsifying records and research and bypassing the FDA, which is the regulator in this case, and they appear to have tried to do that again. That's all part of the consideration for the case. But Lorie, you talked about qui tam. So for those of you who don't know, that's QUITAM, and it's a very specific process. And actually, some people find it quite problematic because in a qui tam case, you have the person who is bringing the whistleblowing case, the relator. And what they can do is they work with the government if there is a case and if the government wins money. I'm simplifying this. If not wins money, but gets money back that it's owed, right? The relator, the reporter, the whistleblower, they get a certain percentage of that money back. So there's an argument to say, well, hold up. This incentivizes whistleblowers. That can't be a good thing, right? That tells whistleblowers, that tells people they can come to the government, they can report things in the expectation that they're going to have a windfall as a result. So, ladies, is that really the case? I mean, would you agree? Is it a problem that relators and whistleblowers get a portion of the proceeds from a successful whistleblowing case?
I no, I don't. And first of all, they took this to the government. The government on this specific case, government chose to not interfere, which then made them eligible to receive a portion of what will be recouped. And they wouldn't know this until they file. So they already took the risk. They already made the good faith reporting, not knowing what the government would do. Once the government said, "I'm not going to interfere with this," that's when they became eligible to take a portion of the quote unquote winnings. So first of all, clearly it's a good faith effort. They would not have known how the government was going to go, right? That they would interfere or not interfere. So clearly, so to me, no, I have no problem with that. And I'm going to let Lorie, I'm going to let you talk. Poor people, they filed this almost over a decade ago. So can you imagine their headache and the possible negative consequences on their professional life, that the risk that they took? Tell me today that I'm going to possibly not have a career starting tomorrow because I'm making a good faith effort, and tell me if I should be able to recoup some of my losses in a decade or more. Yeah, I should. I really should.
And
because
you made
some
a
of
good
these,
point when.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You made a good point when we were prepping yesterday. So we talk about whistleblowing, and that's why it's not tattletaling. It's not airing out your dirty laundry. This is not an easy process. It's a very difficult process to go through. And it's a difficult process personally, mentally, and emotionally to go through this process for whistleblowing. A, you don't know whether the government's going to accept the case. B, you don't know if you're going to be asked to provide additional evidence. And imagine you're working within an organization and you've got to gather additional evidence. You don't know that you'll ever be able to work again. That was something that Elvan, suggested as we were talking. There are big risks to individuals coming out and saying, hey, there are problems within an organization. And even if the case is successful, it may be successful in 10 years' time. That's a lot of time to go without work or to live in an almost permanent state of anxiety about this issue that you raised for the greater good. Lorie, how about you? What do you think about getting a portion of the proceeds of the case as an incentive for whistleblowing? Is it an incentive?
So you both just said a lot of what I was planning to say. So it's hard to come up with new ideas. But essentially, I do agree with the concept. If you're making a report in good faith, you are in many cases putting your livelihood, your family, your life in the limelight at risk. You are subject to many years because these cases don't just happen overnight. Elvan, you highlighted that 10-year duration. Imagine not being able to go get a new role for 10 years and having to continually testify and provide information to prosecutors, not let alone trying to go find another job. And when they ask that question, so why are you looking for a new role? You can disclose only so much when the case is ongoing. So you can't necessarily say, oh, well, I whistle blew on my last company. But that also puts you in, subject to scrutiny. Why would a new company want to hire you when they know that you've whistleblown? To your point, Jessica, you said earlier, this is something that in the corporate world is not always viewed favorably. People don't applaud honesty and forthright transparency. So I think in my mind, a portion of the judgment, and let's be honest, the current administration just upped the amount of money that they'll pay out for whistleblowing. So they're encouraging whistleblowing. Those are things that come to mind from my perspective, Jessica.
No, you said it very well. And you added your own flair. So you always have plenty to say on the topic. But I mean, those are some reasons people don't come forward. I mean, there are other reasons. People, maybe they don't want to lose their job. If you read through some of the cases, the reasons that people don't come forward, they're very human. It's, we may say, well, why didn't anyone speak up or say something sooner? We do that within our own organizations. Why didn't someone come to me and tell me? Well, because they're afraid for their jobs, or maybe they're afraid for their colleagues, or maybe they're afraid of retaliation, or maybe it's easier just to get another job. We know people who have done that, and you can't judge them for it. Right? Because it is a difficult process, and people who are able to come forward, it takes quite a bit of courage. And I'm not saying that people who don't come forward don't have courage. I'm just saying it takes a lot of inner strength to be able to come forward. It's not easy for those folks that think it's just this thing. Oh yeah, you just say something. That's not it.
And frankly, there's also, I think, huge difference between, this is my reaction to it, and I may be completely off on this, but let's say that you're looking for a new job, you did this, you filed a quitam, that's fine. Now you just say, okay, now that's brewing. I still need to make a living for my family. Like, psychologically, I'm going to be able to put it on the back burner. Hard, but let's say that you're going to do it and you're going to get a new job. At this day and age, in all honesty, nobody's looking at your 3 reference letters. They're looking at your social media feed. They put your name in the Google and see, and this is going to be something that pops up, and that's going to make it that much harder. Why? If you are I'm going to say this, if you are an individual who did, how should I explain this? Sales jobs are particularly hard to, sales careers can be particularly hard to recover from when you do a whistleblowing on the marketing, on the subject itself. So, they have uncovered the scheme of dissemination of misinformation within their sales and marketing platform. So it's going to be that much harder for them. So it's not like, and if that's your trade, that's your trade. You're not going to go from, within a week, you're not going to go from, hey, I've been a good sales executive for 10, 12 years. This is my trade. This is what I know how to feed my family. And all of a sudden, to protect myself, I'm going to go look for a barista job at Starbucks. It don't work that way. Like, you know what I'm saying? So the job that you're likely going to apply for is within that category, within that industry. So it makes it that much harder.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, the other thing I realized, and that I'd forgotten, I don't know how or why, is that a lot of people don't even know to whistleblow. Maybe there aren't policies and procedures in place, or maybe they think they're doing the right thing because this is what they've been told to do, and they don't know any better either. That's another reason why people don't come forward.
I will say that what I have been seeing, and I don't know if either of you looked, but if you look at trending, whistleblowing in healthcare is trending upwards. There are more whistleblowing cases, and there's a couple reasons why they think that is, because people have asked, well, why? One, it's somewhat generational. Older generations tend to have more company loyalty, and younger generations do not, because they've seen that corporate restructuring and the downsizing, the ebbs and flows, and so they are more likely to whistleblow. Remote work has also given folks a sense of
Protection, insulation. That's what you're
protection.
thinking.
Yes. Yeah,
Insulation.
I'm trying to say it in a nice way, but yes, absolutely that. And also, they also feel like AI is helping ferret out some of that wrongdoing a little bit sooner than previously. And so those three things together have really kind of led to an increase over the last 5 to 7 years, not just overnight, but really the last 5 to 7 years. So, even pre-COVID. So COVID obviously is an impetus in 2025, but pre-COVID, this was starting to trend upward. And I know when we're recording this versus when it will be released, but this is something to think about for Compliance Week. Talking about this as part of your Compliance Week repertoire. So, yeah.
One
No,
more thing I want
appreciate
to
that
ask you,
insight.
Lorie,
No.
and tell me. Yes, I'm gonna do it. Talking to
Good.
Lorie, anyways, not you. Lorie, do you think, and this is off topic, but I have to ask, when you were counting the reasons why the rate is going up, which is fantastic for all of us to hear, but you touched on something that I'm extremely interested in from a personal and a professional standpoint. Do you think, other than the loyalty, do you think in the older generations there was we are in the age of information, therefore we are overstimulated with information, things that we don't need, we still end up knowing. But do you think because in the older generation there was more trust in authority and brand names
Yes.
and companies, authority figures, if somebody is a CEO, they must have earned it walking through the ranks? And a lot of times I feel like it's because they didn't know so much. Right now we know too much almost. So do you think that there's
Yes.
yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yes. I do think, and again, I'm not, I know I'm generalizing and I feel bad because not everybody's going to fit in that niche, but I do think it is very generational. They have seen that we let the leadership do these things. And to Jessica's earlier point, a lot of times they're the ones prescribing the wrongdoing. They're the directors. In the case we talked about a few episodes ago with the therapy organization, it was leadership that was really at the core of that. So I think it plays out that way. So yes, I do.
Hey, and we're not trying to say don't whistleblow. That's not the point of this episode at all. The point really is to say, like, how amazing is it that people do come forward,
Yes.
given the challenges, professional, personal, and in terms of just the process, the formal legal process of whistleblowing. That's what we're trying to. I actually see whistleblowers like heroes. I mean, I feel like maybe that word is too strong. I'm not sure. But when I think about what it takes to get through the process and the costs of individuals. So when I hear people say that's airing your dirty laundry, or that's, why did you go outside the organization, or, they're never going to be able to get another job, I think to myself, wait a minute, to be able to come forward in that way is pretty amazing. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts, and quite a lot of risk. You're taking a lot of risk to be able to come forward and say, hey, I think there's some wrongdoing here, and it's big enough, it's important enough for me to have raised it and to take some sort of legal action. So that's why we're talking about it in this way.
And from a compliance standpoint, keep in mind that for some of the older generations, the legislation that is in place today in both the US, the European countries, they've both got strong whistleblower protection acts. In addition to, there's the Financial Dodd-Frank Act that has been passed. So I think there is a lot more protection in place for whistleblowers than existed previously. So folks came forward and their life, I hate to say their life was over, but their professional careers really had to they really had to pivot hard because it was very hard for them to continue in their industry once they did whistleblow. Whereas today there's a lot more protections in place from a regulatory standpoint that really supports whistleblowers. So from my standpoint, I think if you know something, we say it all the time. If you see something, say something, and we mean it as compliance professionals, but there are laws in place and there is a strong, it's one of the 7 elements about whistleblowing and non-retaliation. So it's not okay if you retaliate against someone who came forward with a good faith. And I want to hit on just for a moment. I know we're coming to the end of our podcast, but it's really important to say good faith because there are going to be bad eggs in every basket that's going to come forward. Oh, let me see if I can make a quick buck.
100%.
We are not here about those people. We are here about people who have seen something and really want things to be right. They have strong values. They know their company's values and they're trying to do the right thing. Those are the people that we are advocating for when we talk about whistleblowing. Sorry, ladies, I don't mean to speak for you, but I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
It
that
is.
is what we're saying.
And we say bring in comments, bring in feedback about our episodes.
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
if you want to talk, if you want another ear, and if you're not sure what you saw is what you saw, or what you saw is really, you should be a whistleblower. If you have any questions, reach out to your network, reach out to us. It's okay. It's okay to not be sure.
Yes.
And kind of be on the fence. It's okay. All of that is okay. Just genuinely reach out to us and we would be more than happy to talk and say, because all that we can say is what you're going to tell us, right? Then that way we can say, hey, from the sounds of it, yes, you need to try the internal channels. From the sounds of it, we recommend you go to the authorities. To me, I have no problem talking through the process with somebody and let them talk it out loud through the process in their own head.
Yeah, as compliance professionals, and we do that all the time. We talk to each other. Compliance professionals talk to each other to solve problems and get ideas. I think that's a really good offer. But before we close out for the podcast, there are a couple of topics I do want to touch on briefly. Lorie, you mentioned protections, whistleblower protections. And I think this is fundamentally important to the discussion around whistleblowers. What are those protections? Are you able to talk us through a little bit about those?
Yeah, so the big one is that non-retaliation that I talked about. The other thing is giving them, as to the extent they can, providing I cannot speak this morning, anonymous reporting so that they can come forward in good faith, but do it anonymously and to the best of their ability. They will keep your identity shielded. They will offer you that sort of support and to the extent necessary, in healthcare, not so much, but we've all seen those movies where people have to go into witness protection. And typically those cases do not go to that extreme, but they really do try to keep you safe and protected that way and not open to retaliation and lawsuits and things of that nature. So it really runs a gamut and it really depends on how the investigation goes. And the other thing we've talked a lot about at the federal level, I want to reinforce that this can happen at the state level as well. So let's say that you find Medicaid fraud. You may not want to go straight to CMS. You may want to start with your state OIG, Office of Inspector General, your state Attorney General's office. They all have whistleblowing channels where you can report anonymously. Not everything needs to go to the federal level. You can start at the state level. Your county, if it's something smaller, your county also has a prosecuting attorney and they have fraud, waste, and abuse at the county level as well. So there are layers and levels. It's not all straight to the federal government. It's not always like that.
Well, how about, within organizations, Elvan, I'm going to start this with you. How can organizations create a culture where people feel that they can raise issues, they can almost whistleblow internally? How do organizations, or how do we as compliance professionals make it easier for people to raise concerns? Any thoughts on that?
You open the channels, you open the communication channels, you keep them open, and you show appreciation for every little bit that's been reported. And you do what you say you're going to do, and you prove it. That way, the word will spread from the ground level up within the organization. So when somebody reports something, you don't dismiss them. You take it in, you process it, and if possible, if it's a part of your policy, you report it back to them, the steps that you were able to take, or at least the fact that you have taken steps. Not everybody's entitled to every detail, but you can show them appreciation, and you can show them the fact that you've taken it seriously and you've done your due diligence to look into it. Once you start doing that for 5, 10, 20 cases, of course, that depends on the size of your organization. Once you start doing that at low level, people feel listened to. And that's when that little chatter that goes around the water cooler, it's like, oh, I saw that. And then the person says, you know what, why don't you give a call to the compliance reporting hotline at 1-800-100.
It's so true.
That's how it starts. Then by the time it gets to a bigger level, the confidence has already been built by the field level associates. At a bigger level, I think, let's say that the wrongdoing is at a bigger level and the whistleblowers are at higher ranking titles, if that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah.
I think those are even more honest conversations where the C-suite makes it open and clear. We had this on another episode. They make it very clear that my compliance officer is welcome to report whatever they need to report to me. And they have my word that I will not create an environment of retaliation or disappointment, even because a reporting was made to me about my higher executives. I will listen. And no, my compliance, I don't expect loyalty from my compliance officer. I expect truth and honesty.
Yeah. And so I'd say that honesty and that trust is integral to having a speak up culture within an organization. So your policies and procedures, your code of conduct, confidentiality is important as well. So that education bit, that confidentiality, when people come to speak about you, their names aren't going to be plastered all over the facilities, all over the communication channels, and to be seen to respond, even if your investigation finds no evidence of noncompliance, but being seen to take people's concerns seriously. And although it doesn't happen overnight, you're very right. Eventually, people start clocking and going, oh, yeah, we will be heard, even if, and will be treated with some dignity and respect as we raise concerns, even if, there's nothing to the concern. Still, someone's going to take me seriously and respond and at least do me the courtesy of looking into it and not crucifying me for raising an issue. All right. On that note, everyone, we're going to head off. That was a good conversation. I would say bracing, but we could spend more time on it, but I think we've done it some justice. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Take care.